What dire warning from your parents turned out to be absolutely wrong? We can't pay $1 to go into the haunted house because they might not have a bathroom in there. What if you have to go to the bathroom? I'd much rather have this than my experience growing up. My dad would always complain at ticket booths about how it was free that one day, so it should be free today. Or he would ask for some discount that didn't apply to him, or claim to have a coupon that maybe he had at one point or is expired now. We would have escalating levels of managers come and talk to us, and he would keep doing it. He made my mom cry sometimes, and I was just embarrassed. He sees it as good business sense. They think you're stupid if you don't ask for a discount. He doesn't realize this isn't a bazaar. He doesn't come from a country where that's normal. And the worst part about all of this, we could afford it. My dad just hates paying for experiences and would rather go shopping or do anything else. I put it in the story because I knew it would come up, but it seems to have been glossed over by many. Again, he doesn't even come from a country where bartering or haggling is commonplace, at least not in large cities where my family is from. The most you can do is maybe ask for a bulk discount if you're at an independent stall in a market or something, which is something I'm not against and it doesn't hurt to ask. However, my dad takes it a step further and feels that just because he's him, he should get greater discounts or free things. He would rather act a fool and save $1. We were in his home country one time at a place that charged the equivalent of 1 USD for parking and entrance. As soon as we pull up to the guy, my dad starts his spiel and I just roll down the window. I'm sitting right behind him and hand the guy the money while saying I got it. Guy lets us in. Dad starts saying he was trying to save us money and I shouldn't have done that. My mom, for once, didn't enable him and said she's sick of that. It's a business and they need to make money too, and she's not in the mood to be embarrassed today. It happened to be at almost the exact same place where we had the worst of those confrontations with managers only 20 plus years later. There's really not much to say after that. Back in the late 90s, I wanted to go to a temporary exhibition that had an old historical building. We learned about it when the news said that that day, which happened to be the soft opening, had already passed because it was late night news. It had been free and it would cost so much for the remainder of the exhibition. I said I wanted to go, and my parents said we could go the next day. So we show up the next day, and my dad said, yesterday was free. He argued about it for 40 minutes to an hour, and yes, went to very high levels of management. My mom cried. I didn't care about going in anymore. I think we eventually got in for a discounted rate. This area has been built up to include other things since then, and now they charge about $1 to go to the park and look out right next door. This happened around 2017. No, my mom and I have not forgotten. That's why, especially when we're in their home country, I jump ahead in ticket booths and pay for myself and let them sort that out on their own. Story 2. People you meet on the internet are swindlers or people who will end you. Overall, the amount of people who are out there to get me and should be feared all day round was severely exaggerated. That explains some of my social problems, I guess. My mom was very sure the young man I was talking to online was just going to abduct or violate and then end and maybe consume me. Well, we've been married nearly 13 years now. I still have her emails saved from this time, and sometimes I reread them to her just for giggles. Just because I and others have been fine meeting people online doesn't mean you shouldn't be careful when you do meet up with strangers. As a side note, I was very, very stupid the first time I met my now husband. I went to a concert with him, alone. I did not tell my parents who I was meeting, just friends from school. I did not tell my friends from school that I was meeting someone from the net, just boy from another school. I went off alone with him and didn't tell my friends. He could have ended me in the woods behind that concert and no one would have had a clue. You should always tell more than one person when you're meeting strangers. You should take a buddy or have someone set up to check on you via phone or drive by. Do not meet strangers in remote locations. Meet them at malls or dinner locations. Drive yourself. Be safe online and off. People are weird and you are not replaceable. Okay, as a person on the internet, I'm kinda offended. I haven't swindled or assassinated anyone in years. Story 3. When I was in college, my dad was very concerned about my choice of major and kept reminding me that I need to have career options and I can't just choose a major I like. I need to take a major that I can have a career in. I kept telling him I would, and he just wouldn't take that for an answer. I was a double major in computer engineering and computer science with a minor in mathematics. I also went on to get my master's in computer software systems. Also, the only change I made in my major while in college was to switch from a double major in CE and physics to one in CE and CS. I had switched after my first disastrous physics class, where the prof used vector algebra even though it was not a prerequisite, and literally three-fourths of the class didn't know how to use it and was failing because he refused to teach it. I later found out that every time he comes up to teach the intro courses, the entire department has an enrollment crisis due to drop majors. He would brag to the class every week or two about how many times he had failed an entire class. This was 15 years ago. It was happening before the dot-com bust, but on the other hand, computers and the internet were still relatively new, and my dad still refuses to use any computer but the one he had to finally start using at work. For example, he has an iPhone but won't even use maps to get directions. A couple of months ago, he called me from his iPhone and asked me to look up directions to an address and feed him directions to get there. I told him to use his phone and he refused. Then he got angry when I refused to spend 45 minutes on the phone with him telling him where to drive because he won't type an address into maps. I basically told him I'm not his secretary, and if he wants someone to do that, he can call his actual secretary. He owns his own company. I was busy and did not have time to sit there on the phone telling him what turns to take. I told him it was really easy to get directions from his iPhone and offered to tell him how, but he just refused. No idea if he found someone else to give him directions or not. Story 4. My parents and pretty much everyone I knew were extremely against me quitting flying lessons. My parents repeatedly told me I'd regret it at any chance they got. They acted like I was throwing my life away to do hard substances. I think everyone just views being a pilot as being too cool to be boring, so anyone giving up that opportunity would be seen as throwing a life of coolness out the window. In reality, flying is kind of boring. The maneuvers and landings are fun. What you do 90% of the time is boring. It's like driving with another axis, except now you have to listen to radio chatter to find out if you need to move a few degrees. It got to the point where the only way I thought I could have fun was with the military. I talked to 5 Air Force pilots and found that my chance of getting into anything cool was basically non existent. And I'd be back to boring crap, but now under a nice long contract. Screw that. Also, I didn't really have Air Force grades at the time. Now that I'm in college, I definitely don't have Air Force grades, lol. I sunk about 5 grand into flying. I needed to spend roughly another grand to get a private pilot's license. That money was coming from a very finite amount of money dedicated to college. A grand less in college debt is better than chasing a dream I got bored of a year ago. Also, those flight hours don't expire. I can pick it up again whenever, but I really don't have an interest in it. I'm in a new career path that is about as boring, but I'm not stuck in a chair, which is nice. Oh man, I do hope his new path brings him the happiness he's looking for. Story 5. That, quote, guns are evil and there's no reason anyone should have them. Or words to that effect. Amazingly, this was said before and after we moved from the San Jose Bay Area to rural northern Nevada. You might be able to make that argument in the city, but after learning about what ranchers deal with on a semi-regular basis, coyotes, cougars, snakes, mortally wounded livestock, and so on, I wised up. Guns are a tool, and in some cases a very necessary one, as in life or death necessary. I'm not going to get into the finer points of where that line is drawn, but I can tell you that the simple fact that a person owns a gun doesn't make them evil or dangerous or anything of the sort. To be fair, this was said by my mother, who had a slew of gun-related tragedies hit one after the other when she was fairly young. A friend's demise, another due to a cleaning mishap, so on. She is legit traumatized by guns, I think. Story 6. Here's a few. That my 2 choices in life were either Harvard or McDonald's. Sheesh. Bit of a gray area in between those 2 extremes. When you press the red button with the triangle in the car, all the doors fall off. That if I used one brand of shampoo and a different brand of conditioner, that my hair would fall out. Also, when I was 5 or 6, I asked what would happen if you went the opposite way, that you turned the turn signal. My mom told me the car would explode and end us. Not sure why she told me that crap. I would be unemployable if I didn't learn cursive handwriting. Parents and teachers made me think that every job interview would have a cursive test in which they would measure the loops on the L's or something. If you unscrew your belly button, your bum will fall off. I did my best to avoid screwdrivers for a large part of my childhood because I lacked the willpower not to stuff them into my belly button. I was terrified at the thought of losing my bum, but intrigued by the possibility. If you get in trouble at school, it will go on your permanent record and ruin your life. Not once has anyone, from college admissions to prospective employers to loan officers, so much as mentioned the legendary permanent record. I went back to my old high school a year after I graduated and asked to see what was in my permanent record, and they'd already thrown it away. Okay, well, hold on. The belly button thing is putting me to tears because I can't understand it. Were they obsessed with sticking screwdrivers in their belly button before or after her father told her that? And the permanent record thing, yeah, was only permanently temporary, right? LOL. And if you're liking the video so far, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. On to the next story. Story 7. I was born left handed. My pops used to smack me if I used my left hand, in essence, forcing me to be right handed. I had to constantly remind myself to use the hand with my birthmark to avoid smacks. As an adult, I asked my pops why he forced me to be right handed, and he gave me some tepid response about when you left handed, you'll have a tendency to pull that way when you're driving, exposing you to oncoming traffic. Sounded like total and complete BS to me, and is confirmed by all the left hand drivers in the world that don't spontaneously drive into oncoming traffic. If anyone has any ideas, I'd love to know. For reference, my pops is an old school Vietnamese dude. I feel like it's a cultural thing, but I was raised American and have no freaking idea. Also, my mom warned me as a kid that eating the loose pieces of dried ramen from the pack would make me gravely ill. I kept doing it with no problems. One day, she said that in front of my dad when I was a teen, and he just gave her this, "What the H are you talking about?" look. Story 8. My ex stepdad owned a restaurant where I worked as a busboy when I was a teenager. He was always very tough on me, berating my work, etc., while telling me that he was going to go easy on me and when I get a job in the real world, his favorite phrase, my boss would be so much tougher on me. I quit a month before my 16th birthday and went to work at the local Dairy Queen and found out he was full of it. My mom left him shortly after that, thankfully. Another one, when we would go to the beach, I would never want to get out of the water, so my mom would tell me that staying in the water too long would make me quote unquote waterlogged. She said she could look into my eyes and see the level of water in my system. If the water raised above my iris, that meant I had to get out and let the water drain before I would drown. I believed this for far too long. Also, my mom would always tell me, "Take that look off your face or it will freeze like that," when I was little. I took that as fact. I really wanted dimples like my friend down the street, so I would sit in my room with pencil erasers pushed into my cheeks forever. No dimples still. And finally, boys only want one thing from girls. Be careful in high school, that's all the boys will want to do. Turns out the one thing all the boys I hung out with wanted from me was a turn at playing Pokemon on my Game Boy. Alright, so yeah, that's true. Boys only want one thing from girls, to be the very best, like no one ever was, and to collect them all. Story 9. D&D is a satanic cult that will lure you in order to offer you up for sacrifice. Lol, no mom. The really weird thing is, in the vanilla rules, making deals with devils and demons is typically a terrible idea that will backfire sooner or later. All the potentially satanic things in the game are presented as bad things to oppose. It reminds me of the Doom Scare. Yes, there are demons, but the point is to end them. Demons are the bad guys. The only thing I can think of are warlock packs, which even then explicitly tell you how terrible of an idea it is, and there's no real way to back out of it except for ending your own patron during the endgame. Also, pacts with devils are much safer than pacts with fae. Devils are sticklers for rules and binding contracts. They'll tell you upfront what the price of the pact is, because tricking people makes them less likely to further the pact down the line. Fae will make ambiguous pacts with vague rules and repercussions that will almost always screw you over worse in the end. Same thing with the Diablo video game series. One of my favorite quotes from a BlizzCon panel back around the time D3 came out: "Everything that is not human in the Diablo universe is basically evil and needs a sword stuck in it." Half the time, getting a D&D group together to play is like herding cats. Everyone's schedule is different, no one can play on the same day, someone got sick, someone else got called into work. Well, now the weather has decided to make the roads an ice rink. No self respecting cult operates like that, and besides, the Church of Satan is a legitimate church, cult. They don't do human sacrifices, and I don't think there's many people who are practitioners of Santeria who play D&D. One of the ladies at church said this to me once when I mentioned we were getting the D&D group together, and I gave her the look of, "You're freaking stupid," and said, no, not satanic, not a cult, nerds sitting around with dice, pencils, and paper playing a game. Grow up." Story 10. Microwaves will give you cancer. Cell phones will give you cancer. Smart meters will give you cancer. Wi Fi will give you cancer. Conventionally grown food, yeah, will give you cancer. Western medicine will give you cancer. And antibiotics will give you cancer. My mom was obsessed with cancer. Forget sitting near the TV will give you cancer. Then she bought a 12-inch black and white TV. A bit of a self fulfilling prophecy? So basically, he was raised by WebMD. Got it. Story 11. Here's a few. Getting less than 90% in school will make me a trash man and live a very miserable life. That if I kept picking my nose, my head would cave in. You won't walk around life with a calculator in your pocket. Sniffing ends brain cells. I didn't sniff or snort even during colds because I was terrified I would lose my brain cells. Turns out my mom thinks sniffing is annoying and didn't want to hear it. People who disobey their parents end up in prison. Don't sleep with socks, you'll become blind. Every rice left on your plate would be a new pimple on your face. People are going to push you to smoke cigarettes. Everyone I've ever met who smokes and offers me a cigarette says the same thing when I tell them I don't smoke. Good for you, I wish I didn't. Turning on the lights in the car while driving is illegal. Watching the TV will give you square eyes. When I was 4 years old, I took a mirror down with me whenever I went to watch TV to ensure my eyes had not gone square. 20 years later, they're still around. Complete BS. You can't eat steak that is pink on the inside, that's how you get sick. Believed this till I was about 19 until I learned that it pretty much can be as red in the center as you like, as long as it's properly seared. Turned out my mom just didn't like rare steak and felt uncomfortable making it for me and my sister, so she just lied. Story 12. Don't switch jobs too often. Employers will think you have no loyalty. I played by this logic for way too long. Too long, actually. I stayed at a soul crushing job for nearly 9 years. My last 2 years were spent actively trying to promote within the company, but I knew I wouldn't go anywhere at the location I was at, so I started putting in for other areas at other locations. One of my supervisors received a phone call to ask about me because the hiring person was curious about all the positions I put in for, and my supervisor actively stood in the way of a transfer by saying I was only interested in supervisory positions, and I was never called. This is the same supervisor who said they didn't want to lose me because of my work ethic, and so I was suspicious about their intentions with the phone call. I quit 2 weeks later. That was 3 years ago, and I've had two jobs in that time frame. I go into the interviews with honesty. I'm bouncing around because I'm searching for a place to make a career. If it's that company, then great. If not, then I'll eventually move on. I don't say that last part, but it is pretty heavily implied. I've always found it strange that companies want references from your current job when applying to them. Like, how could it possibly go over well to have it known by your current employer that you're actively planning to leave them? All right, so if any of these stories resonated with you, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.